In this video we will explore the rendering settings we can apply when using the Corona renderer. First off, let's start by explaining what the rendering settings are. They are mainly algorithms that calculate effects not displayed in the editing environment, due to their complexity. More specifically, this is the editing environment of 3ds Max. We see a floor plan, the elevations of our project and the perspective, camera viewport. Based on this perspective, here is the render we will get. So, our render has lighting, shadows and all the materials are displayed with their attributes, with reflections, bump effects and so on. To go from this to that, we need to hit the render button. Before we press render, we need to adjust the rendering settings. To do so, either press F10 or click the render setup button. Although 3ds Max and Corona have several rollouts with commands, you should not feel overwhelmed by all these settings. Corona is really easy to set up, and from all the settings we see here, I will explain only those that I believe are vital to control the quality of your images and the rendering time. To use Corona, we must first select it as our renderer. At the top of the render setup window, make sure production rendering mode is selected as the target and then choose Corona in the renderer drop-down list. If you only use Corona as a rendering engine in all your projects, then you can set it as your default renderer to avoid repeating this step every time you start a new project. To do so, scroll down and open the Assign Renderer rollout. Make sure that next to Production, Corona is selected and click on Save as Defaults. To produce a render, choose one of the following options. Go to the menu Rendering and choose Render. Click the Render Production button from the main toolbar or press Shift and Q. This window is called Frame Buffer. It displays the rendering progress and gives us full control over the rendered output. It allows us to review, post-process and save the render. When the rendering process starts, two windows appear in our screen, Frame Buffer, and the rendering window. The rendering window shows the progress of the render. More specifically, next to the current task we see a timer that shows the rendering time in real time. Below the current task is a progress bar that displays a green color that serves as a visual aid of the progress of the render. Once the render is completed, the rendering window disappears. There are two buttons in the rendering window, Stop and Cancel, and they are both used to abort the rendering process. The progress of the render can also be viewed if we go to the Status tab and the Time section. And now, let's go to the Frame Buffer window. It consists of the main view, this one, where the render unfolds, and this side panel that consists of 5 tabs. The Post tab allows us to fine-tune the render directly in the Frame Buffer window without the need of other software, like Photoshop. Some of the most useful settings here are the following. Use the simple exposure to control the brightness of the image. The more we increase this value, the brighter the image gets. While the lower we set it, the darker the render. We can either type the desired number or use the arrows to set the exposure. I will scroll up to make my render brighter. White balance is a photographic term and refers to the process of removing any color cast or tint from our photos. If all the lights that we are using have a white color, then we probably won't need to adjust the white balance. But if we use warm lighting, then we need to adjust the white balance. Otherwise it will look like there is an orange filter on our render. How does white balance work in Corona? The lower we go, the colder the render gets, while the higher we go, the warmer it becomes. In our example, if we set the white balance to 4000K, the render becomes kinda blue, while if we set it to 7000K, then it becomes too warm. It's very orangish now. There is not a right or wrong value, it all depends on the atmosphere you want your render to have. When the temperature is set to 6500K, which is the default value, it looks too warm to me, and so, I will slide down, and at approximately 5500K I'll stop. Contrast is the ratio between the white and the black, or in other words, the light and the dark parts of a scene. Contrast makes everything pop up, and I usually set it between 2 or 3. There is not a right or wrong value here. You can also keep it 1. I usually use saturation to make my render more gray. Don't overdo it. Just a tad. Let's say it's a complementary setting to the white balance we saw. Apart from the settings we see in the tone mapping rollout, we can click on the plus button and add more. One setting that you may need is the highlight control. Do you see these parts of the image where the sun hits the surfaces? Highlight compress controls how these parts look, the highlights of the render. The higher we go, the less intense the bright areas of the render will be and will have less contrast, while the lower we go, the brighter they will look, getting overexposured. So, if instead of 1, we set it to 5, the highlights look kind of dull, while if we set it to 0.7, they get much more intense. For now, I will make it approximately 0.95. Another setting I'll add is curves. Curves allow us to adjust the contrast of the image. So, what's the difference between curves and contrast? When using the curves, we have better control over the contrast of the image. Click on the blue arrow to expand the settings and then click on the editor. If I click somewhere here and drag towards the bottom, the dark areas become darker, while the bright areas remain as is. While if I click somewhere here and drag towards the top, the bright areas become brighter. And so, through this setting we can control the contrast of the image by adjusting separately the dark and bright areas of the render. If you don't like the adjustments you have made, simply click reset and try again. It's good to do subtle moves here, as this effect is rather strong. At the end, we want to form a light S shape. Once you are done, click on the X button. I actually don't want too much contrast in this render, so I will disable the curves. Corona provides a large list of ready-made LUTs, allowing us to quickly change the look of our image. It's like, let's say, applying a filter to our render. Let's select LUT and enable it. The render got automatically warmer, and kind of yellower. Let's click on the arrow to see the settings. The opacity allows us to control the strength of the effect. So, if I make it 0.5, it's more subtle now. From the drop-down list you can explore the various LUTs and choose the look you prefer. Next to the tone mapping rollout, there is a checkbox. If I disable it, we can see how our render looked before applying the tone mapping settings. I prefer it after the settings. It has more contrast, more depth, all the colors pop up more. Next rollout is the Bloom and Glare. Enable Bloom and Glare and you will see the effect automatically added to all the lights of the scene. In my scene for now, the only light I have is the sunlight. I don't have yet any artificial lights. So you can see over the window the haze added. If I make the bloom intensity 15, you can see how stronger the effect got. The glare effect is when you see a star effect on the lights. We will see this later on once we add the artificial lighting in the scene. Another effect I like to use in my renders is the sharpening. I usually set the sharpen amount to 2 and also set the blur radius to 0.5, to make my render look sharper, more defined. I can also set it to 0 and be very sharp. I prefer a value of 0.5, so that my render doesn't look very harsh. Moving forward to the denoising rollout, if I try to enable it, I can't. It informs us here that to use denoising, we must first enable it from the Scene tab. Press F10 to open the Render Setup window. Go to the Scene tab and to the Denoising section. Denoising will be added at the end of the rendering process, and it will smartly blur the image to reduce the noise present. The default option is none, and if we keep it, we need to allow the render to calculate for a long time to be noise-free. While if we select Corona High Quality and re-render, now it gets enabled in the frame buffer and our render will look smoother at the end, by getting blurred out from the denoising method. Now that it finished, you can see the result with and without the denoiser. Without the denoiser it looks grainy, while with the denoiser it blurs the textures to remove the grainy effect. The more time we allow the scene to render, the cleaner the image we get. Later, we will see how we can produce a clean render with no noise or blurriness. In the Stats tab we see general statistics of the scene, like the times needed to render or the noise of the scene or the number of polygons and so on. I mainly use this tab to check where the noise level of the scene is to decide when to stop the render. We will see this more thoroughly later. History allows us to save renders and compare them side by side. This feature is useful especially when we are on the testing phase, and we are still trying to figure out our solution. To save a render in the History tab, click on the Store Current VFB button and a preview of the render will appear in the History panel. Now let me do another option, so that we can compare them. Let's say that I'm not sure whether I want to have the bench in front of the bed. I will select it, right-click and choose Hide Selection to hide it. I'll do a new render. Although it has a lot of noise, I will press Stop, since I just want to test how the history works. I will click on the Store Current VFB button to save this render as well. The latest one goes at the top. How can we compare these two renders? If I left-click on the first render in the list, I set as A for the A to B comparison we are about to do. And if I right-click on the second render in the list, I set as B for the A to B comparison. In the preview window we see a red slider and the half left shows render A, and the half right shows render B. Click on the slider and move the cursor to the left or to the right. When we slide to the left, the B image unveils, while when we slide to the right, we see the A image. And so we compare them. If we want to delete a render saved in the History panel, simply click on the X button at the bottom right corner of the render preview. Let's right-click anywhere in the scene and choose Unhide All to unhide the bench. DR stands for Distributed Rendering, which allows us to render using multiple computers. I will skip this for now as I'm using only one computer. A really cool feature I always use is Light Mix. First, we need to go to the Render Setup window, so press F10 and go to the Scene tab. Click on the Setup Light Mix button in the General Settings rollout. Personally, I keep the default settings here, which is the option Instanced Lights, and click the Generate button. If we now render and go to the Light Mix tab in the Frame Buffer window, you will see a list of all the lights we have in the scene. For now we have two lights, the light from the sun, Corona Sun, and the light from the environment, Skylight. What we can do from this tab is to turn on and off lights. If I disable the Corona Sun 001, here is the result we get from the environment light. We can also adjust the intensity of a light. Let me enable again the sun and make it 0.5. Now, we have a softer sunlight entering the room. Moreover, we can click on the color field and change the color of the light. So, let's say select an orange color to make the sunlight warmer. I will take it back to white. So, Light Mix allows us to play with the lights of the scene and create different lighting scenarios. You will realize how much it comes in handy later when we will see the artificial lighting of the scene. Corona keeps all this information saved, so if I close the Frame Buffer window and hit the Render button again, all this info will reapply to the next render. Go to the Render Setup window, to the Scene tab and to the General Settings rollout. In the Progressive Rendering Limits section, we can set the rendering time and the noise level. As its name denotes, in the time limit fields we set the rendering time. So, if I set 5 minutes, the scene will render for 5 minutes and then it will stop no matter the noise level at that point. While in the noise level limit field, we set the desired noise level. A good range of values to set here so that our render is clean is between 2 to 4. The lower we set it, the cleaner the image we get, but at the same time the longer it needs to be calculated. Personally, I set the noise level to 3%. The software will render the scene until one of these reaches its limit first. So, if for instance I set here 5 minutes and a noise level of 3% and press render, the scene will render for 5 minutes and then it will stop, although the noise level limit is not 3%, but much higher. To see what the noise level of our render is, go to the Stats tab in the Frame Buffer window. In the Performance section we see that the target is 3% and next to it is the current noise level. And we can see that for the 5 minutes rendering time that we set, the noise level is approximately 7%. And the render stopped after 5 minutes, although it didn't reach the goal of 3%. Personally, when I do my test renders, I set the time limit to 5 to 10 minutes and I'm not interested in the noise level. This way the scene will render for 5 to 10 minutes and then it will stop rendering no matter the noise level at that point. Once I have finalized my scene and I'm ready to render the final image, I will set the time limit to 0 and I will go to the noise level limit and set it to 3%. This way I will get a clean image. Going back to the render setup window, if we click on the Show VFB button, the frame buffer will open, and we can see the latest render produced. Another way to do that is to go to the Corona Renderer toolbar and click on the Open Corona VFB. If we click on the Start Interactive button, we start the interactive rendering. The interactive rendering allows us to work on the scene, while the viewport is being rendered. If for instance I select the bench, right-click and choose Hide Selection. The viewport will automatically re-render with the bench hidden this time. If while we are working, we click in another viewport, it will automatically start rendering that viewport. To avoid that and always render the camera viewport, open the Render Setup window and at the top part, at the View to Render section, choose the camera you want to always render, Corona Camera 001 in our case, and click on the lock icon. Now, no matter which viewport is active, it will always render the Corona Camera 001 viewport. To stop the interactive rendering, click on the Stop button. To start again the IR, we can click and hold the Render button in the frame buffer and choose Start IPR. Instead of rendering the full viewport, we can use the Region tool to select specific areas of the viewport we want to render. Simply create a rectangle, a region of the part you want to render. We can also start the interactive rendering using the respective button from the Corona toolbar, Start Interactive Rendering in Corona VFB. To sum up, I set the noise level limit to 3%. For my draft renders, I set the time limit to 5 minutes, while for my final renders I will set the time to 0. I enable Light Mix by clicking on the Setup Light Mix button and I choose Corona High Quality as the denoising method. While the image is being rendered or after it is produced, I always adjust the image from the Post tab and from the Light Mix tab. The Common tab contains commands that are general and don't affect the photorealistic result, but refer to the size of the render, the resolution, and stuff like that. In the Common parameters rollout, we want the single option selected. Single means to produce one still image, one render. The other three refer to animation, which this course doesn't cover. Go to the Area to Render section. When View is selected, the entire viewport will render. Click on View and from the drop-down menu select Region. A white rectangle appears in the active viewport. Click on the handles to adjust the size of this rectangle. Anything that is inside the rectangle will be rendered, while anything that is outside this region will not render and will remain as it was before. Let me adjust the size to include only the glassware and hit Render. The area outside the box remains untouched and Corona only renders the area inside the region. So, Region can save us lots of rendering time when we test specific areas of our scene where we don't have to render the whole viewport. When Region is enabled, actually when this rectangle is enabled, if we try to select objects in the scene, we can't. We are locked to this rectangle to only adjust its size. In order to unlock, either click this X button you see here or right-click anywhere outside the box. Now we can go and select objects again. But we can see that 3ds Max saves our selection. So, if we hit Render, it will only render what is in this region. If we want to adjust the region, we will go to the Render Setup window, to the area to render, and although here it says region, we will click and reselect region. Now the handles are again enabled, and we can change the size of the region. Let's go back to the area to render and now choose crop. Crop and region do the same, which means that they will both render what is inside the box. The difference is that region keeps untouched anything outside the box, while crop won't even display it. More specifically, hit render and now only what is inside the box renders and the remaining scene won't appear in the frame buffer window. Go back to the area to render and now choose blow up. Blow up is similar to crop in terms that it will render only the part that is inside the box, but it will enlarge it to fill the output display. Go back to the area to render and now choose selected. Unfortunately, this option does not work with Corona, but only with the Scanline renderer, which is the native 3ds Max rendering engine. What it should do is to render only the objects you have selected. However, if you try it, it will render the full viewport, like when we have the view option selected. So, please ignore this option. Let's take this back to view. Moving forward to the output size, this section is an important part of the composition. It describes the proportions of the render that we will produce. We can do one of the following. From the drop-down menu select one of the real-world output sizes or choose custom and type in the width and height fields the desired values. Choose one of the template ratios on the right side. Type the desired image aspect. Now let me explain to you more these values. So here you see it says 1200 pixels by 900 pixels. And if I go and choose a template ratio, let's say 800 by 600, then these values automatically enter in the fields, but nothing really changes in our viewport. That's because for the viewport to adjust to the selected ratio we need to enable Show Safe Frames. To do so, click Shift F, or click the camera viewport's name label, Corona Camera 001 and turn on Show Safe Frames from the drop-down menu. These are the safe frames and what is inside them will render. So, if I click on these arrows and scroll up or down, I can increase or decrease the size. I can make it more of a square size. Or go to the image aspect and type 1, so that the width is equal to the height. In this case, there is too much floor and ceiling and basically empty space which doesn't do justice to the design. So, I would rather decrease the height of the window and now it's like I focus more on the bed. When you are satisfied with the width to height ratio, click on the lock icon next to the image aspect. This way we can now type a value in the width field. Let's say 2000 and the height value automatically adjusts. For my draft renders I usually try values of 900 pixels height and for my final renders 2000 pixels. If I want to print the renderings, then I usually put 4200 pixels width, unless my client asks for specific dimensions. Please always have the Show Safe Frames enabled, otherwise you will get confused why you see other things in your viewport and other are being rendered. To be more precise, if I disable Show Safe Frames, you see that the viewport stretches to fit the window. So, we don't see the full bed or the ceiling. But if we render this is what we get. Scroll down to find the Render Output section. I personally prefer to automatically save my renders once they are computed. To do so, click on the Files, to choose where you want your render to be saved and enable the Save File checkbox. Otherwise, to save your render, go to the Frame Buffer window and click on the Save button. Now that you know how to set up the rendering settings and to use the frame buffer, we are ready to start making some renders.